Tony Soprano's relationship with Corrado, Jr. Soprano, is often framed as a tragic family bond mangled by pride, age, and bad decisions. That version is emotionally satisfying in the way fairy tales are satisfying. It assigns coherent motives, tidy lessons, and the comforting idea that love sits somewhere at the center of the carnage. The more accurate reading is less sentimental and far more revealing. This is a power struggle inside a criminal enterprise, intermittently disguised as family loyalty, and managed by a man who treats attempted murder as an occupational disagreement, right up until the violence forces him to feel weak in his own body. The mystery of why Tony tolerates a coordinated hit but cannot stomach an accidental shooting is only a mystery if Tony is mistaken for a consistent moral actor. He is not. He is consistent in a different way. He forgives what he can categorize, leverage, and control, and he hates what humiliates him, exposes him, or threatens the mythology he sells to everyone around him, including himself. Start with the first attempt on Tony's life. It is deliberate, planned, and executed under the governance model of that world: hierarchy, retaliation, and public authority. Junior wears the title of boss. Tony runs the family's real operations and courts the captains behind Junior's back. Tony does not simply help out. He steadily makes Junior irrelevant, turning a crowned figure into a prop. In any normal workplace, this would be a political maneuver. In this workplace, it is a mortal offense. Junior's response, ordering Tony's death, is horrifying by civilian standards and utterly legible by mob standards. It is not personal in the way an ordinary betrayal is personal. It is structural. It is the violent enforcement mechanism of a system that defines respect as obedience and disrespect as a capital crime. The hit attempt is, grotesquely, a rule being applied. That distinction matters because Tony can metabolize business. He can even admire it in the abstract, because it reassures him that the world still has rules and therefore can be played like a game. The hit fails, and failure is the hinge. A successful assassination ends a story. A botched assassination creates an administrative crisis, which is Tony's natural habitat. Tony responds like a ruthless executive cleaning house after a failed coup. He wipes out Junior's support structure, kills the loyal muscle, absorbs the crews, and leaves Junior breathing but declawed. Suddenly, the moral question is no longer, how does Tony forgive a man who tried to kill him? It becomes, why would Tony kill a man who can no longer hurt him and is now useful? Tony does not keep Junior alive because he is merciful. He keeps Junior alive because Junior's continued existence solves problems. Keeping Junior alive is strategically elegant in a way only immoral systems can be elegant. A visible boss attracts surveillance and absorbs heat. The more law enforcement focuses on Junior, the more Tony can operate behind him with plausible deniability. Junior becomes the lightning rod, the sacrificial face, the convenient defendant. Tony also gets something else: time. With Junior tied up in legal trouble and constantly monitored, the risk that Junior can marshal another effective strike drops dramatically. In a world where nearly every decision is a risk calculation, Tony chooses the option that preserves operational advantage. Killing Junior would bring immediate satisfaction and long-term exposure. Leaving him alive offers long-term utility and the opportunity to pretend the family still has a respectable hierarchy. If this seems cold, it should. It is. Then there's the psychological engineering Tony performs on himself. Junior ordered the hit, but Tony conveniently reassigns emotional blame to Livia. A mother's betrayal is not something Tony can file under business. It is existential contamination. It is the nightmare version of family. The person who is supposed to protect is the person who wants you erased. So Tony pushes Junior into a more tolerable category: manipulated uncle, misguided old man, prideful boss nudged into action by a toxic mother. Therapy supplies Tony with the perfect varnish for this arrangement. The explanation attributed to his psychiatrist is that Tony stood by Junior through jealousy and spite, partly to prove he was a good son, clinging to the fantasy that a mother could not hate a good boy. It is the kind of insight that sounds compassionate until it is recognized for what it is: a diagnosis of performance. Tony's forgiveness is not spiritual growth. It is a desperate audition for moral legitimacy. He plays the loyal nephew because he cannot bear the thought that loyalty is meaningless. Carmela's reaction makes Tony's posture look even more distorted. She does not live by mob ethics, even when she profits from them. Her husband was nearly murdered. The man who ordered it is family, which merely means the betrayal is more repulsive, not more negotiable. Her hatred is steady because it is based on an uncomplicated premise. Attempted murder is not a misunderstanding, and a family name is not a pardon. The clarity is almost jarring. It exposes what Tony's business framing really is: a coping mechanism that allows him to keep functioning without facing the full horror of what his life requires. Carmela can hate Junior cleanly because she is not trying to keep the machine running. Tony must keep the machine running, so he learns to call gasoline water and to smile while it burns. Now, contrast that with the shooting. This is not a boardroom decision executed by intermediaries. This is intimate violence. Junior pulls the trigger. Tony's body pays. Coma, rehab, weakness, dependence, the indignities of recovery, these are not abstract consequences. They are physical humiliations that puncture the central brand Tony sells: dominance. A planned assassination attempt that fails can be reframed as a rival's unsuccessful power play. A gunshot that nearly kills cannot be reframed away from the fact that Tony becomes a patient, a man strapped to medical routines, a man who cannot simply bark and have the universe obey. The shooting makes Tony experience himself as vulnerable in public. That is what he cannot forgive. Tony is not offended by attempted murder. He is offended by being made small. The bitterness is amplified by how the shooting lands in Tony's moral bookkeeping. The first attempt at least fits the mafia's warped cause and effect logic. Tony undermines the boss retaliates. It is provoked in the sense that Tony recognizes he was playing a dangerous game. He can tell himself he earned the blowback through ambition. That is not humility. It is emotional accounting. It lets him preserve the idea that the world is orderly and his suffering is a consequence of choices, because consequences are preferable to randomness. The shooting feels unprovoked in the narrow moment. There is no clear chess move. There is only chaos. And chaos is the one opponent Tony cannot negotiate with, intimidate, or outmaneuver. The obvious rebuttal is dementia. Junior's decline is not subtle, and the story signals it repeatedly. Confusion, repetition, paranoia, disorientation, and the bleak comedy of a once feared man becoming trapped in loops. The varsity athlete refrain is not merely cruelty, it is symptomatic cruelty, the kind that becomes automatic as the mind frays. There are multiple scenes in which Junior's state appears glaringly obvious, and Tony somehow manages not to see it. That is not because Tony is incapable of understanding dementia. It is because Tony is highly capable of denial. He only believes what he is emotionally prepared to believe, and he is not prepared to accept that one of his defining relationships is dissolving into a medical tragedy that offers no satisfying villain. Tony's distrust is also earned in the most poisonous way. Livia plays at confusion when it benefits her. Junior earlier entertains the idea of faking impairment to soften legal consequences. In a culture where weakness can be performed as a strategy, the audience for weakness becomes cynical. Tony's trust in a dementia claim is therefore not a medical question. It is a betrayal question. His dementia radar has been scrambled by years of manipulation. So when Junior genuinely deteriorates, Tony has room, emotionally and narratively, to suspect that the shooting reflects something more sinister. Not lucid intent, perhaps, but subconscious intent. In that reading, dementia does not excuse, it reveals. It strips away the filters and leaves the underlying resentment free to act. This is the point where Tony's worldview becomes both grotesque and consistent. Tony hates weakness in others because weakness mirrors his own fear of being diminished. In his moral universe, illness is not simply illness. It is failure of control, and failure of control is treated as a character defect. That is why the crew's reaction skews toward condemnation rather than care. Junior is not ill. Junior is soft. Softness is dangerous because it is unpredictable. Unpredictability cannot be negotiated with, and negotiation is the only non-lethal tool these people have. So the shooting becomes, in their eyes, not a tragic accident by a cognitively impaired elder, but a weak man taking a shot at the boss. An unforgivable act because it violates not morality, but hierarchy. The system cannot tolerate the idea that authority can be toppled by frailty and confusion. It requires the pretense that violence is always rational, always chosen, always meaningful. Notably, not everyone responds with the same bloodthirst. Bobby and Janice, hardly saints, merely people with a limited capacity for denial, ask the practical question: who is arranging Junior's care when his money runs out? Their focus is unromantic but rational. It highlights how bizarre the rest of the response is. The sudden eagerness to treat Junior as disposable the moment he becomes inconvenient. That reaction is not just cruelty, it is self-preservation. Acknowledging dementia as a legitimate explanation would force these people to confront a terrifying reality. Any of them could become Junior, and the system would treat them the same way. Tony's own response after the shooting is telling for what it does not include. There is no immediate retaliation hit. That is not evidence of forgiveness. It is evidence of avoidance. Junior is one of the few older figures in Tony's life who did not consistently exploit him when he was young. That history makes it psychologically difficult for Tony to order Junior's death, even when anger demands it. So Tony chooses a different defense: emotional exile. Junior becomes dead in a social sense, removed from Tony's inner world, banished from the realm of care and acknowledgement. It is an elegant compromise. Tony avoids the guilt of direct vengeance while still punishing Junior through erasure. Avoidance also explains Tony's delayed recognition of dementia's extent. Many of Junior's worst episodes happen outside Tony's direct line of sight. Tony does not witness enough first-hand moments to force acceptance, because he does not pursue them. He hears about incidents, minimizes them, and stays uninvolved when Junior wanders into public embarrassment. This is the same mechanism Tony uses elsewhere. If a truth is unbearable, it becomes a rumor. Only late, in a final interaction that drains Junior of all remaining authority, does Tony accept what he has been refusing to process. Junior is not performing. Junior is gone. The shooting was not a lucid act of malice. It was a tragedy. That realization does not heal Tony. It empties him. This is also why the show's small comedic beats around Tony's recovery sting so sharply. Tony is capable of treating minor personal inconveniences as world historical injustices. A man who lectures others about strength can become petulant when his own body forces restraint. The contrast is not accidental. It demonstrates that Tony's moral code is not a code. It is a justification machine. He demands empathy as tribute, but offers it only when it is strategically useful. He can minimize other people's catastrophic struggles while inflating his own discomfort into existential suffering. The lesson is not that Tony is uniquely flawed. It is that power encourages narcissism, and Tony is power in human form. Then comes the argument that the inconsistency is not character psychology at all, but narrative necessity. In a ruthlessly violent system, allowing Junior to live after ordering a hit stretches plausibility. A more realistic Tony might have eliminated Junior immediately. Some contend that the story's need to keep Junior on screen overrides internal logic, a kind of plot protection. Even that critique fits the show's theme. People cling to what is familiar, even when it is dangerous, because losing it forces them to face the emptiness underneath. Tony keeps Junior partly because Junior is useful, but also because Junior is a living artifact of Tony's origin story. Killing him would not just remove a problem, it would remove a piece of Tony's narrative identity. Predictably, speculation refuses to leave well enough alone and escalates into conspiracy. One theory insists Junior orchestrates Tony's death in the finale. The logic is neatly cynical. Junior never truly forgave Tony for undermining him. Junior already tried to kill him. Junior once flirted with the idea of faking impairment. And Junior demonstrates influence even within institutional settings, where other patients can be coaxed into doing his bidding and maintaining pecking order. Therefore, despite age and confinement, Junior could arrange a final hit through intermediaries. The appeal of this theory is obvious. It makes the story circular. It restores agency to a man otherwise reduced to a tragic husk. It turns dementia into camouflage, and the finale into revenge. The objections are equally obvious. Surveillance, access, and genuine cognitive collapse make the mastermind portrait difficult to sustain. More importantly, the series does not require a single architect for Tony's end. A life built on predation creates enemies without end. The only question is which enemy gets the last move. The finale's thematic power comes from inevitability, not attribution. Still, the theory persists because it captures something emotionally true, even if it is not literally provable. Junior's betrayal is foundational, and foundational wounds invite foundational explanations. Another speculative leap goes further and suggests Tony died when Junior shot him, and that the rest of the final season functions as a prolonged subconscious drift. The show's heavy use of dream logic and near-death metaphysics makes this kind of reading tempting. Whether accepted or dismissed, it underlines the same point. The shooting is treated as an existential hinge, after which Tony's life feels increasingly unreal, increasingly haunted, increasingly defined by the sense that the bill has already come due, and the only remaining question is timing. The related fantasy is retirement. Could Tony, after being shot, step down gracefully and live a quiet life? The answer is as cheerful as the business model deserves. Not really. Retirement in that world is either temporary, coerced, or terminal. A boss carries too much knowledge and too many liabilities to be allowed permanent comfort. Even if power enables a short fade into the background, financial expectations and organizational paranoia drag the retiree back into conflict, because a former boss is either a resource to exploit or a risk to eliminate. The show's bleakness is not decorative, it is structural. There is no clean exit from a life designed to prevent exits. If Tony had died from the shooting, the succession scramble would have been predictable and unglamorous. An acting boss emerges, cracks under pressure, earners angle for control, others refuse the throne because it attracts bullets and indictments, and outside families circle for advantage. The candidates vary by revenue, alliances, and temperament, but the outcome is usually the same: infighting, opportunism, and a weakened organization ripe for exploitation. The show is allergic to heroic transfers of power because it understands something essential. There is nothing noble about inheriting a violent enterprise. The throne is not a prize, it is a target. Amid all of this cold logic, Junior's decline remains one of the story's most effective gut punches. A man who spent his life demanding respect is reduced to panic, confusion, and the inability to understand what is happening. Scenes of him hiding or being questioned while he cannot grasp reality invite sympathy without absolution. Dementia does not rewrite his cruelty. It does, however, expose the ultimate futility of his code. The same world that worshipped hardness treats illness as weakness, and weakness as justification for abandonment. Junior is punished not only for what he did, but for becoming the one thing his culture cannot tolerate, a powerless man. The final conversation between Tony and Junior distills the emotional truth beneath all the strategy talk. The question of love surfaces, and the answer dissolves into fog. Tony is left staring at the ruin of a relationship he once needed, one of the few older bonds that felt, at times, like something resembling care. In that moment, the hatred is not solely about a bullet. It is about the collapse of Tony's story, the belief that endurance earns love, that loyalty purchases family, that keeping faith with the old ways will be rewarded with something other than loneliness. The reward is emptiness. The prize for surviving is learning that survival does not restore what was lost. So why does Tony tolerate the assassination attempt, yet seethe over the shooting? Because Tony forgives what he can categorize and exploit. The botched hit fits a familiar file folder: power struggle, business, chess. It can be repurposed into strategy and used to justify control. The shooting cannot be filed away, because it lives in the body, announces weakness, and humiliates the man who believes humiliation is a fate reserved for other people. The cruel punchline is that Tony wants to be both ruthless professional and wounded son. The first identity can live with a failed business attack. The second cannot forgive the moment the mask slipped, and the world saw what Tony cannot bear to see: vulnerability. Subscribe.